Over the weekend, there was what is being described as a coup attempt against Turkish President Erdogan and his government by a faction within the Turkish armed forces. But is it what it was originally reported to be? We actually still don't know. I mean, from the beginning, it was reported that only part of the military was involved in attempting to take power from Erdogan. At least 290 people have been killed during this incident. More than 1,000 people have been injured. Thousands have been since detained. And the big picture is that the coup is being described as unsuccessful. Mass arrests following the not successful completion of this coup attempt. Nearly 3,000 soldiers, nearly 3,000 judges arrested or detained. And according to Nanuhal Singh, author of the coup analysis book Seizing Power, the coup attempt failed mostly because the plotters didn't first secure control of the media and shape the narrative. So very quickly, Lewis, you had Erdogan live streaming to Facebook Live or whatever it was. You had conflicting reports about the coup, and then it was revealed that the top military generals seemed to not be supportive or involved. So this, from the beginning, was not orchestrated in the way that so-called successful coup attempts typically are. But then the questions came up about, well, it was actually so sloppy that this may not even have been a real coup attempt, and we'll get to that.
That is, yeah, that would be incredibly disturbing. But the whole thing struck me as very strange. The way we've seen military coups happen before, like you said, this was a small number of soldiers. They were well armed and equipped, but it just didn't seem as chaotic as other military coups have.
And that's where it starts to get a little odd. For example, there was a unit of special forces sent via helicopter to kill or capture President Erdogan, but they didn't. And we now are getting reports, including one from Reuters, which says actually it's not really clear why they didn't capture or kill him, because supposedly there were aircraft that could have taken down the aircraft that Erdogan was in, but seemingly opted not to. And this is where some people call them conspiracy theories, some call them sort of obvious, increasingly obvious hypotheses, that President Erdogan himself may have had some involvement in either staging or sort of luring this factional coup to be attempted in order to bolster his power. And whether it's true or not, it has sort of worked, because the main opposition parties in Turkey, who, for example, have been condemning the attempt. There have been international leaders, such as people from the US and NATO and the European Union, saying, hey, we need to respect democratic institutions in Turkey, even if Erdogan is a disaster, and Erdogan is basically Hamas with better resources and infrastructure. We should respect the democratic process. If this was a sort of setup, it does seem to have been pretty effective.
If that's a big if.
Yeah.
Citizens took to the streets immediately and interfered with the coup.
Right.
And people that openly admitted that they were not pro-Erdogan, but
Right.
they were pro-democracy. And if it does come to light that this was kind of baited by Erdogan or set up by Erdogan, they are going to be furious, and it could cause even more problems for him.
The fact that the coup attempt began in the early evening instead of at a more inconspicuous time, as these often do, and the fact that the incidents were largely confined to Istanbul and Ankara is part of what is bolstering these hypotheses. The former leader of the opposition Republican People's Party, Deniz Baykal, said he was doubtful about whether this was a genuine or staged attempt for a coup. And then a number of social media users have been comparing the coup attempt to the Reichstag fire, which Adolf Hitler used as an excuse to suspend civil liberties and order mass arrest of his opponents. And remember, Erdogan, as he said, quote, is increasingly against the internet every day, and we know about all of the completely authoritarian, anti-free speech stuff that he has supported. What better pretext to further hamper those services and outlets than saying, hey, look at what happened here.
Mm-hmm. The guy who hates the internet taking to Facebook Live during the coup to tell everyone what is going on. Yeah, it's you do find out who your enemies are in a situation like this. This is incredible for him. This is there's talk that he might change their execution laws because of this, and it's really just ended up being far worse because this coup was unsuccessful. Of course, it could have been a disaster if it was successful as well.
And let's remember that most military coups don't lead to just a wonderful situation where everything is just absolutely great. Just Google list of coup attempts since 1990 and take a look at what's happened in most of the places where military coups have taken place. In the middle of all this, the U.S. government has prohibited all U.S.-based airlines from flying between the U.S. and Turkey. And of course, as we mentioned numerous times, Istanbul Airport truly becoming a hub to travel in both Europe and Asia, and direct flights on Turkish Air from so many U.S. cities. That is actually a really big deal. We're going to continue following it. We will see if we can ultimately get the truth. DavidPakman.com /Reddit, REDDIT, if you want to discuss this with us on our Reddit discussion forum. After years of political fighting, we now have those infamous 28 pages, a suppressed section from a 2002 congressional report on the 9/11 attacks, which detailed possible ties between the Saudi government and the 9/11 terrorist attacks. These have been released. Years and years of speculation and controversy and conspiracy theories, and the classified documents do highlight possible and alleged links between high-ranking members of the Saudi Arabian government and the 9/11 hijackers. Former Senator Bob Graham, who previously said the 28 pages point a very strong finger at Saudi Arabia, was glad about the release. Minnesota Congressman Rick Nolan said that the pages confirm much of the rhetoric preceding the U.S. attack on Iraq was terribly wrong. The big picture from the report, Lewis, from the pages is, quote, while in the United States, some of the September 11th hijackers were in contact with and received support from individuals who may be connected to the Saudi government. A few examples, pages of this. A Saudi intelligence agent named Omar al-Bayoumi provided, quote, substantial assistance to the hijackers and met them inside of the Saudi consulate. Al-Bayoumi received payments from companies that had ties to bin Laden and al-Qaeda. Another alleged Saudi intelligence agent named Osama Basman also gave direct aid to hijackers and worked with Bayoumi. And the list goes on and on and on. And the problem, Lewis, and the reaction from the Saudis has been this exonerates us. And the reason for that is that there is, unless there is stuff in the redacted parts of these 28 pages, which we don't know what's in there because it's redacted, this doesn't do anything definitive. This is a number of suspicions and assertions. But if we are talking about incontrovertible proof of collaboration and assistance from Saudi higher-ups, Lewis, I guess we don't have it, although we have a lot of smoke here, and we know very often when there's smoke, there is fire.
Yeah, it doesn't look good, but what would change, right? I mean, even if we had incontrovertible proof that there was government assistance, they're an ally, they have oil, we need oil, everybody's buddy-buddy, and what would change?
It's just shocking to me how so few Americans, not that any life lost is not tragic, but comparatively few Americans died in the Benghazi attacks, and the whole government has been focused on it for months, really for years. We now have documents that emerge which assert, with a number of alleged examples, that Saudi Arabia was directly tied to 9/11. And what? Nothing? I mean, is this just it? Okay, we've gotten the pages. They make assertions, but they're unproven, and that's it. The sickening and vile friendship and completely immoral alliance with Saudi Arabia continues as they stone people to death in the streets and do all of the other stuff that we've been reporting on. That's it. I mean, is that it?
Well, it's the power of the media and of fear-mongering and of all of that, because when Republicans take to the stage and start saying Hillary, Hillary, Benghazi, Benghazi,
yeah,
everybody is just watching and they buy it. And so I don't see those Republicans as quick to get on stage here and start saying Saudi Arabia 9/11. Maybe if they did, people would care, but the Republicans don't seem to care.
Send me your thoughts about this. It is just absolutely disturbing, and nothing in those 28 pages is surprising. It is newsworthy, but it is not surprising at all. Okay, let's talk about Melania Trump. Donald Trump's wife, Melania Trump, spoke on the first night of the Republican National Convention, and she copied part of her speech from Michelle Obama in 2008. There is nothing ambiguous here. We have the video. It's the same damn thing. She was praised for the speech, which at least partially wasn't hers. Here is the overlapped video for effect, so you can see how it is basically the same minus a word or two. You will hear overlapped yesterday's Melania Trump speech and the 2008 Michelle Obama speech, and let's listen together.
The values that you work hard for what you want in life.
For what you want in life.
That your word is your bond.
That you do what you say you're going to do.
Keep your promise.
That you treat people
with
dignity and respect, and because we want our children and all children in this nation to know that the only limit to the height of your achievements is the reach of your dreams and your willingness to work hard for them.
Yeah. At least she delivered the lines with an Eastern European accent. That is different in some way, right?
Yeah, the delivery was slightly different. However, the teleprompter reading skills, not up to speed.
Later in the speech, she went on to say that we have nothing to fear but fear itself, and then closed out by talking about how she has a dream, and then mentioned one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. No, she didn't really, but she might as well have. And so then the question is, who do you blame? Do you blame the speechwriter? Well, that makes sense, but prior to giving the speech, Melania told Matt Lauer of NBC that she claims she wrote it with as little help as possible and went over it only once before the event. Yeah, the going over it only once before the event, I believe. How little help was possible is something I am doubting a little bit more. You don't need to go over it that much when it's material other people have delivered, I guess.
Well, as little help as possible could still mean that someone else wrote the whole thing, right?
Yeah, no, that's true. And the Trump campaign initially denied that there was anything copied, but then also said that the speech and the team that wrote the speech pulled elements from many speeches. And then they said they are not going to be firing anybody over this, although former Trump campaign manager Corey Lewandowski said someone should absolutely be fired. And current Trump campaign manager Paul Manafort said they're not going to fire someone, but then RNC chair Reince Priebus said somebody should be fired, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How else can you explain this, right? I mean, you know how people say, if you give 1,000 monkeys 1,000 typewriters, they will eventually rewrite the works of Shakespeare, because there's just no other way. They will eventually come across something that is the same as the works of Shakespeare. Maybe the English language, Lewis, isn't varied enough where it's just natural that you would come up with an identical paragraph from a speech 8 years later.
No, this is blatant plagiarism. And whether or not this is trolling or sabotage is still up for debate. But after we play this next clip, it might become more clear.
Well, lastly, she seems to have rickrolled the audience. If you're not familiar with the social phenomena, rickrolling is a prank and an internet meme where either a video or music or lyrics from the 1987 Rick Astley song, Never Gonna Give You Up, appear. Most famously, the line is never going to give you up, never going to let you down. And listen to this unusual moment in the Melania Trump speech.
If you want someone to fight for you and your country, I can assure you, he's the guy. He will never, ever give up. And most importantly, he will never, ever let you down.
Somebody, I think, may have pulled one of the most subtle and amazing pranks on Melania Trump, maybe in the history of convention speeches here.
Whoever wrote this is trolling the people they wrote it for. And I can't say with certitude that it's sabotage, but it's certainly at the very least trolling. And this person, let's be honest, should be fired immediately. And if they aren't, well, it just shows the incompetence of the Trump campaign.
If not sabotage, to quote William Shatner, it might have been sabotage. And that's something I'm not hearing anybody discuss. I have video of the first joint interview that Donald Trump did with his running mate Mike Pence, the Indiana governor. And you may remember that Donald Trump has been absolutely berating Hillary Clinton for her vote in favor of giving George W. Bush the authority to take us to war in Iraq. What you may not know is that Mike Pence voted the exact same way. And on 60 Minutes, Leslie Stahl asked Trump about that and said, wait a second, he voted the same way Hillary Clinton did. You slam Hillary about it all the time. You never slam him about it. What about that? And I will play Trump's answer for you. And let's see if you can figure out what the hell his reasoning is here. Take a look at this.
When the World Trade Center comes tumbling down with thousands of people being killed, people are still, I have friends that are still
Well, we did go to
suffering here.
war, if you remember. We went to Iraq.
Yeah, you went to Iraq, but that was handled so badly. And that was a war, by the way. That was a war that we shouldn't have done because Iraq did not knock down.
Your running mate
Iraq did
voted
not
for it.
I don't care.
What do you mean you don't care that he voted?
It's a long time ago. And he voted that way, and they were also misled. A lot of information
you've
was given to
harped on
people,
this
but I
with-
was against the war in Iraq from the beginning.
Right.
Yeah, but you've used that vote of Hillary's, that was the same as Governor
That's right.
Pence,
Many people
as
have.
the example of her bad judgment. You've
Many
said that
people
many
have, and
times.
frankly, I'm one of the few that was right on Iraq.
Yeah, but what about he?
Okay. He's entitled to make a mistake every once in a while.
But she's not. Okay, come on.
But she's not.
She's not.
No, she's not.
Yeah, I mean, this just makes absolutely no sense, right? Well, I don't care how Pence voted. People make mistakes. But Hillary's vote on the exact same thing in the exact same way, that's a big deal. So why is the standard different? Is it because Hillary Clinton is a Democrat, or because she's his opponent, or because she's a woman, or just because she's a Clinton? I don't get it, but the standard is very, very clearly different. And then, as if that wasn't cringeworthy enough, later during the same interview, actually, it might have been before, I now don't remember, in another moment during this interview, Mike Pence was asked whether Trump was out of line when he said John McCain, former prisoner of war, was not a hero because he got caught. And look at how Donald Trump deals with this moment in the interview.
Do you think John McCain is not a hero because he was captured?
I have a great deal of respect for John McCain.
Do you think he went too far?
You could say yes. That's okay. On that one, you could say yes. I mean,
Yeah, I'm glad Trump decides what Pence can and cannot say as his running mate.
Yeah, it's like Trump knew he went too far with that one.
Yeah.
And is kind of, he won't admit, though. He won't say it about himself.
Yeah.
But yes. And
Not exactly a match made in heaven between these two.
No, well, wasn't Trump having second thoughts about this?
Reportedly, Trump, as late as midnight before the announcement, was asking his staff, hey, can I change my mind on this? And his staff saying, no, he's already been filmed coming into New York, and you can't change your mind on this. Awkward, maybe the most awkward political interview since Sarah Palin couldn't list a single thing that she ever read. We'll take a break. Plenty more coming up, and we will check in with our two correspondents in Cleveland later today. Actress Lena Dunham is upset because she says serving sushi in a college dining hall is cultural appropriation from the Japanese. This relates, I'm having trouble even telling you this with a straight face. Students at Oberlin College, her alma mater, are complaining that the school is engaging in insensitive behavior by serving culturally appropriated food in its dining halls. This includes banh mi sandwiches from Vietnam, as well as sushi, traditionally considered Japanese food. Tomoyo Joshi, who's a junior, wrote in the college paper that the undercooked rice and lack of fresh fish is disrespectful. Okay, well, at least they aren't saying that serving sushi, period, is the problem. It's that it's not being done well. And I can actually understand being upset by crappy fish on my rice. But in comes Lena Dunham, who, as I mentioned, went to school at Oberlin, and she said the following, which I will put up on the screen for you. There are now big conversations at Oberlin, where I went to college, about cultural appropriation and whether the dining hall sushi and banh mi disrespect certain cuisines. The press reported it as, how crazy are Oberlin kids? But to me, it was actually right on. This really makes no sense to me. I mean, American culture is cultural appropriation. It is a mix of cultures from around the world that have come to the United States. Our system of government is based on the British system. Rock and roll, which is considered American, is based on blues, which is based on Negro spirituals sung by slaves from Africa. You'd better stop serving chicken parm, Lewis, because that's cultural appropriation. The region of Italy is named Parma, after all.
Our language is Germanic, right? Our alphabet, Latin? Yeah.
And of course, banh mi is made with baguette, which is French anyway. So who really culturally appropriated that? This is sort of indicative, it's ridiculous, but it's indicative of this on-campus problem that we've been dealing with, the safe spaces, the pointless political correctness that goes above and beyond anything that is just trying to limit people being offensive for the sake of being offensive, the concerning decisions made about free speech and discussions of terrorism. We've talked about growing anti-Semitism on campus. This is, on one level, just sushi, but it is representative of so much of the problem of what's going on right now.
It's definitely part of that world. And believe me, I understand if you're going to serve sushi and banh mi's, please try to do it well.
Of course.
So I wouldn't call it cultural appropriation. It's more like cultural annihilation.
It's just bad food, right? I mean, if the
Yeah.
problem is that the fish isn't fresh, then that's just a problem. It's not a question of being offensive to the Japanese per se, because the food comes from them. I think it's the totally wrong angle to take on it. I think this is ridiculous, and Lena Dunham getting involved in this as opposed to something else that seems worthwhile, given that she has a platform and is someone of notoriety, seems like a real waste of time to me. Antonio Sabato Jr., a actor and underwear model. He was a featured primetime speaker at the Republican National Convention, and he went on to tell ABC News during an interview that President Obama is a Muslim. He did an interview after his just amazing, rousing speech, and we will play a little bit of that for you right now.
Choices that I wouldn't have made.
Like what?
Well, I mean, we're talking about, I mean, first of all, I don't believe that the guy is a Christian. I don't believe he follows the God that I love and the Jesus that I love. I think he has an agenda from the beginning. I think he's...
So then the interviewer is seizing on that, choosing to go back to it. Tell us a little more, underwear model Antonio Sabato Jr. What about President Obama tells you that he is not a Christian?
Time is we've got time too. What, specifically, you meant religion seems to be very important to you. Why is it that you don't believe that President Obama is Christian? Is it the man who regularly attends church services with his family?
No, he does not. Actually, he does not attend church. He actually has never talked about Jesus Christ once.
Oh, okay.
I've met a lot of Christians. I know Christians. I am one, and I don't believe he is. And I think he grew up.
Why? Why don't you believe he is?
It's in my heart, man. I just see it for what it is. I believe that he's on the other side. I think.
What's the other side?
Oh, the Middle East.
Right.
He's with the bad guys. He's with them. He's not with us. He's not with this country. He doesn't support.
Obama isn't a Christian name. He hasn't ever talked about Jesus Christ. Antonio Sabato Jr., former underwear model, has met Christians, and it's in his heart that Obama is just flat out with the bad guys in the Middle East. Not with any of the Christians in the Middle East, not with any of the Jews in the Middle East, but specifically with the bad Muslims in the Middle East. This guy's a genius. How does he know so much stuff, Lewis? It's incredible.
Apparently you learn a lot on the set of an underwear shoot. But
Yeah.
I think this guy would be great friends with Scott Brown.
Yeah, and Scott Baio, who has been at the Republican convention. This convention, Rachel, has been way funnier than the feud between Taylor Swift and the Kardashians, in my view.
Yeah, I completely agree. But I also think that what he's saying is kind of not that outlandish in terms of what other Republicans have said, because there was a poll a few years ago, and I think it was about over a third of Republicans that said that they believed that he is a Muslim. And it was interesting because 65% of those who thought that he was a Muslim were uncomfortable with that fact. So maybe what he's saying isn't so far outside of the lines of what other Republicans have said, but still.
Yeah, my initial reaction was, wait a second, you've got a sort of birther type, at least going, not specific, not literally a birther, but a birther type who says, I know that the truth is Obama's a Muslim. How are you going to allow someone like that to speak at the convention? And then, as Rachel mentioned, actually about a third of Republicans pretty recently shared that view. And Donald Trump, Lewis, was one of the most vocal birthers over the last few years. So actually, although my reaction is you would want to keep someone like former underwear model Antonio Sabato Jr. as far away from the stage as possible, he actually reflects the views of 1 out of 3 people, presumably in that room, if it's a sort of average representation of Republicans.
Yes, of Republican voters, no doubt. And it's mainstream. It's mainstream in that party. You would think that if it's so mainstream, the Republicans should have made that part of their platform.
Yeah, I mean,
Obama is Muslim.
The platform was completely off the deep end anyway. At least put in that they should, and maybe even something about the birth certificate. Why not? So rounding out the convention with some celebrities, Antonio Sabato Jr., actor Scott Baio, who was, by the way, completely off his rocker. I mean, seemed to... I don't know if he had a small stroke while he was doing interviews, or what happened to him, but totally incoherent. I guess Angelina Jolie's dad, Ted Nugent, and Kirk Cameron were not available for the particular, at the time that they would have made speeches. Insane disaster and we will talk to you more about it after the break. Interesting story going on involving Twitter and right-winger Milo Yiannopoulos, who has been a guest on our program. Twitter says that they have permanently banned Milo Yiannopoulos from Twitter after they believe he encouraged his followers to go after Ghostbusters actress Leslie Jones with racist and insulting tweets. Leslie Jones happens to be black. Here is a quote full screen from Twitter. Twitter spokesperson told BuzzFeed News, people should be able to express diverse opinions and beliefs on Twitter, but no one deserves to be subjected to targeted abuse online, and our rules prohibit inciting or engaging in the targeted abuse or harassment of others. So if you're not familiar with Milo, he is super popular among the alt-right. He's a Trump supporter. He gets invited to speak at college campuses. He gives speeches that are often as short as going up to the podium and saying, feminism is cancer, and then just going back to his seat and taking questions. The events at the colleges often are protested. He's more or less a provocateur. And there are people, including Trump supporters, who, I guess because Milo is a Trump supporter, who are saying, oh, Twitter has banned Milo. His free speech rights have been violated. And of course, this is ridiculous, right? Twitter is not the government. They have policies which they believe Milo violated, specifically that he's engaging and inciting the targeted abuse of specific users. There is no right to having a Twitter account. Now, you can disagree with Twitter's policy, or you can argue, oh, Twitter is unequally or unfairly applying the policy to Milo, we believe, because of his right-wing beliefs or whatever. But what is with the free speech misunderstandings, Lewis?
I don't know what people think this is. I mean, when a government writes laws, the laws are enforced by the government, and that means if you violate certain laws, you get tried in a court, you're found guilty, you're convicted, and the same applies to people who that's how it works. So unless you are tried, convicted, and imprisoned or punished somehow by the government for just expressing your First Amendment rights, then your First Amendment rights have not been violated. I get it. You get it. We all get it here, right?
Yeah, and Rachel, Milo has responded by saying this is the end for Twitter. Anyone who cares about free speech has been sent a clear message. You're not welcome on Twitter. If you believe that this is a sort of an unequal application of Twitter's policy, that's one thing. But free speech seems to be very misunderstood by many of his defenders.
It definitely is, because it makes me believe that they don't think that there's repercussions for what you say. And if something that you're saying is kind of, as Lewis was saying, violating a law, then it's going to violate a law no matter what. I'm not saying that it is, but I'm saying if it were something that was hateful or some sort of very kind of negative speech. But it's also interesting because it kind of reminds me of how Facebook now is struggling to define hate speech in the aftermath of all these shootings, and especially with the live streaming of that video. And I know you talked about that earlier. So I just think it's kind of within the framework of hate speech and social media. I don't think the lines are as blurry as people think they can get away with.
Well, the argument that his defenders are making is that the problem is that his views are conservative, right? Rather than that they are actually inciting racism against Leslie Jones. And thus, Lewis, it is sort of a political statement that is being made. Now, Twitter's defense is we are taking these incitement some people call it dogpiling incitements very, very seriously. Milo Yiannopoulos is not the only person who in the last 48 hours has been permanently banned. He may be the one who's getting the most attention. This was on the front page of CNN.com, etc. But there is a counter argument, which is more nuanced, which is, no, it's not a violation of free speech, but this is a form of censorship. And that's where I think it gets a little blurrier, which is to what extent, if even those incited by Milo are not threatening violence, for example, then maybe there should be a more laissez-faire attitude by Twitter on this. I don't know.
Yeah, well, maybe. But Twitter has the right to censor their users, and you don't have to use Twitter. You can use anything you want. So I agree that it is a form of censorship, but still, I mean, how mad can we really be at Twitter for that?
What do you think, Rachel? I mean, is this just a case of Twitter is just a private business and they can do whatever they want? And even if they said we are not going to have conservatives on, that would still be something they would be able to do. There might be serious repercussions for that in terms of PR, but they would be allowed to do that.
I think in terms of the definition of censoring information, I agree with Lewis, it is. But I do think if you're violating a policy, especially a policy that is pretty clear, their policies are pretty clear in how they define hate speech. And if someone is kind of pointedly putting that out there and there is a credible threat, then I think, okay, it might be censorship, but it has a good reason for it.
The Donald Trump forums online are abuzz over the banning of Milo Yiannopoulos. We will see what new platform he now uses to get his
filth,
to get his material out there.
Maybe Tumblr.
Tumblr, I hear, is huge right now among the alt-right. Yeah. Here is something insane from yesterday's third day of the Republican National Convention. There's this conservative political commentator and talk show host, Laura Ingraham. We actually used to talk about her with some frequency, although her name hasn't come up on the show for a while. She appears to have made a Nazi salute following her speech at the convention in Cleveland, Ohio yesterday. This is very strange. And yesterday I started hearing rumblings of it on social media. I hadn't seen it. And I said, no way. I'm sure if I see this, it would not look anything like the Nazi salute. But it does. It absolutely looks like 53-year-old Laura Ingraham, in praising Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump, did something that is indistinguishable from the Nazi salute. Let's take a look at it a couple times. Here's the first one through.
The United States of America.
Right. Yeah. So this is incredibly awkward. I'm going to play it again for you, this time without audio, and you'll actually notice that immediately after doing the Nazi salute, she seems to recognize that it's a bad idea and awkwardly shifts into some waving. So let's take a look at it now with no audio, and you'll notice immediately after doing the salute there, she sort of immediately tries to just look to the right and shift into waving because she realizes, whoa, wait a second. This is probably not a good thing to do. So it looks like she sort of unconsciously Zig Heils and then catches herself. In the past, though, Laura Ingraham has actually been pretty outspoken against ever making analogies to Nazis. She's talked about this on the O'Reilly Factor. She says it's always ridiculous to make comparisons to Nazis. This would not be close to even the first person making the Nazi salute at a Trump-related event. We've been covering that Trump fans have yelled Heil Hitler. They have yelled Heil Donald Trump, Zig Heil, et cetera, at a variety of these rallies. This has started almost at the beginning of Trump's campaign. So it's actually not that odd that somebody was bound to do it at the Republican National Convention. Although if you had asked me last week, take a look at this list of speakers, who do you think is most likely to do a Nazi salute? I don't think I would have said it was Laura Ingraham. I really don't think so. And of course, Donald Trump on multiple occasions retweeting anti-Hillary memes and images that started on neo-Nazi frequented message boards, et cetera. This is very odd. Is Laura Ingraham a Nazi? No, I'm not saying that. I've not heard anybody say that before. But the optics of, you've got the campaign, you have the candidate who, of the candidates, mainstream Republican or Democratic candidates from the last who knows how many elections, has the most vocal support from the white supremacists, has led to white supremacist websites needing to upgrade their servers to account for the increased traffic as a result, at least partially, of Donald Trump's campaign, has retweeted images that came originally from havens of white supremacists. And then someone gets up on the stage at the Republican National Convention and does something that looks absolutely no different than the infamous Nazi salute. What a disastrous Republican convention. We're going to talk to Luke Vargas a little bit later about what needs to happen today on day 4, the fourth and final day of the convention, to try to get something positive out of it, because it has just been all negative. 3 days of Melania Trump copying a speech. Ted Cruz goes up there and effectively attempts to sabotage the 2016 Republican campaign, speculating from the outside that this was Ted Cruz basically starting his 2020 campaign, and you round it off with a Nazi salute on the stage. Trump needs to go big tonight, or it's going to be a really, really bad Republican convention.